In a stunning turn of events, Robert Durst, the real estate heir, was found guilty of murder. The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was read, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to the beginning. Robert Durst, a member of the wealthy Durst family, had a history of run-ins with the law. His life was one of privilege, but also of darkness and secrets. Durst's life was marked by tragedy, including the disappearance of his wife, Kathleen McCormack Durst. She vanished in 1982, and despite numerous investigations, her body was never found. Durst had always maintained his innocence, but suspicions surrounding his involvement in her disappearance lingered. The couple had a tumultuous relationship, with friends and family describing it as volatile and controlling. Durst's behavior became increasingly erratic, and those close to him began to fear for their safety. As the years went by, Durst's life continued to unravel. He became a recluse, hiding from the public eye and avoiding any mention of his wife's disappearance. But in 2015, Durst's life took a dramatic turn. He was arrested and charged with the murder of his friend, Susan Berman. The prosecution's case relied heavily on a documentary film, The Jinx, in which Durst was featured. The film's director, Andrew Uretsky, had been investigating Durst's life, and the footage captured would become a crucial piece of evidence. The incident that led to Durst's arrest was a shocking one. Susan Berman, a close friend of Durst's, was found murdered in her home. The police investigation that followed revealed a trail of evidence pointing to Durst's involvement. The key piece of evidence was a letter sent to the police, alerting them to Berman's body. The handwriting on the letter matched Durst's, and it was this discovery that led the police to him. But what happened next would change the course of the investigation forever. Durst was caught on camera, whispering to himself, "What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course." This shocking confession would be a pivotal moment in the case. The investigation into Durst's involvement in Berman's murder was meticulous. The police followed a trail of evidence, including DNA and eyewitness accounts. But despite the mounting evidence, Durst maintained his innocence. The prosecution's case relied on the documentary footage, as well as testimony from those who knew Durst and Berman. But here's what wasn't shown in the trial: the full extent of Durst's mental health issues. His lawyers argued that he was not fit to stand trial, citing a history of psychiatric problems. This revelation raised questions about Durst's culpability and whether he was truly responsible for his actions. The trial was a dramatic and intense affair. The prosecution presented their case, highlighting the evidence against Durst. The defense, on the other hand, argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that Durst was not guilty. The testimony of key witnesses, including those who knew Durst and Berman, was crucial in building the prosecution's case. But Durst's own testimony would prove to be the most damning. He took the stand, and his responses to questioning were erratic and inconsistent. The prosecution pounced on these inconsistencies, using them to build a case against Durst. As the trial drew to a close, it became clear that the verdict would be a guilty one. The verdict was read, and Durst was found guilty of murder. The courtroom erupted into chaos as the decision was announced. Durst's reaction was one of shock and dismay. He had maintained his innocence throughout the trial, and the guilty verdict was a devastating blow. But as the dust settled, one question remained: was justice served? The case against Durst was built on a complex web of evidence and testimony. But some argue that the trial was not fair, that Durst's mental health issues were not given sufficient consideration. And here's the question nobody asked: what if Durst was telling the truth? What if he was not responsible for the murders, but was instead a victim of circumstance? The answer to this question may never be known, but one thing is certain: the case of Robert Durst will go down in history as one of the most shocking and intriguing of all time. In the end, Durst's guilty verdict marked the end of a long and twisted journey. He was sentenced to life in prison, bringing closure to the families of his victims. But the case raises important questions about the nature of justice and the law. Was Durst's trial fair, or was it a miscarriage of justice? The answer to this question is complex and multifaceted. Some argue that Durst's guilt was clear, that the evidence against him was overwhelming. But others argue that the trial was flawed, that Durst's mental health issues were not given sufficient consideration. As we reflect on the case of Robert Durst, we are left with one final question: was this justice, or just the law? The answer to this question will continue to divide us, a reminder that the pursuit of justice is never truly black and white.